all of these professional sports type people swarming around us, wondering whether he'd ever walk again, much less play football. So anyway, he never got to go to Korea, but the rest of us got to go to Korea. And during that period of time in Korea, it was delightful. I had a truck,
In Korea.
a repair truck,
Yeah.
and it's a 2.5-ton truck, and you have a van in the rear, and you have your repair thing in the rear seat. And so I would load up these R100 radios. They're broadcast band radios, AC/DC things, big dropping resistor that long and that big in diameter.
State of the art.
And they work battery or, AC. And these were for the Armed Forces Radio Service broadcast band. And I'd load these things up from the salvage pile, fix them, and I'd trade them for cases of steaks. Actually, the priority was Mickey Mouse boots, the insulated boots, parkas, steaks, white paint, because most of the paint you can get was colored. We had all the booze we needed, and all of the beer.
How'd you get all the booze?
Toddy drinks. Booze was easy to come by. Cigarettes were only a buck a carton. It was great service. And then they brought over this MPQ-10 counter mortar radar. And so I was part of that installation team. Promoted 7 times while in Korea. Unfortunately, it was to PFC every time. A bit irreverent in those days. They see, you go out in the field and you make your rounds, and come back to this base depot, and people were saluting and marching around and getting up early in the morning, and I didn't believe it. And so the commanding officer and I came to an understanding that I would just simply give him my stripes when I came back, and he would think about giving them back to me when I left. He was generally so glad to see me go, he gave them back. But I had this counter mortar radar, the MPQ-10, and it was mounted on a 75mm gun carriage, and it had an analog computer and the radar set, which in conjunction with the antenna just scanned an azimuth like this, and then motors would reverse, and then it would reverse again. And this poor motor would last about 2 hours before the damn thing burned out. Well, it was a minor little thing, because you have a hell of a lot of mass that you have to reverse, change direction every time the thing happened. And this thing was, the theory was that it would track a mortar shell and get the parabola, mortar shells follow parabola, get a mathematical description of its arc and zero in on the point that the mortar shell originated, so that you could then call in artillery for the coordinates. And in theory, it worked very, very well. In practice, it hit rain clouds, birds, trees. It chased me once. And it was never really up long enough to do any damage in the Korean War, although I understand it did work in Vietnam. It was developed at Bell Laboratories, by the way.
It automatically launched mortar shells, or just needed coordinates?
Oh, no. It would scan an azimuth. If it hit what appeared to be a mortar shell coming in, it locked in on it. That's why it had a tendency to sight in on birds and go a little bit wild, or rain clouds.
But it'd have to have a parabolic path, whatever it locked in on, or else we'd realize it's not a mortar, wouldn't it?
Well, this was during the, this was before the days of digital computers, and analog computers were what were used in those days. And so sometimes it confused parabolas with reflections. And just as soon as it did that, well, of course, it would say, aha, give a damn, that rain cloud is a mortar shell, and the coordinates are up there 6 miles in the sky. There were a few little bugs in it. It did eventually work well. And it was also a hybrid set in that it was part semiconductor, and that was racy in those days, and part vacuum tube. Because all of the other radar sets I worked with and all the radios were all vacuum tube. This was one of the first semiconductor.
In the early 1950s?
Yes, sir. It came out of Bell Labs.
They were just playing with
54.
that idea
54.
at that time, though.
I know they were playing with a damn thing, and they put 40 of these sets that they were playing with out in the field.
We're still doing that kind of thing. We're still doing that kind of thing.
Yep, yep.
They had to prove it out.
45 megabit radar, or radio, I mean, they're distributed all over the nation. None of them work. Teams of Bell Evers go all over the place trying to fiddle with them. They're actually made in conjunction with NEC.
But that's what it takes. You got to test them out like that to find the bugs.
These were called New Equipment Installation Teams, or NEI teams, and they had some civilians running around with them, and they needed signal corps repairmen, which I was in those days. And one of the other fellows from La Crosse, he's still here, Jimmy Ritter,
Oh, yeah.
was on that same team. In fact, he started with those sets in the States and came over to Korea. And Jimmy's with Northern States Power here.
Right.
And I haven't seen him since Korea, you know that? I keep meaning to look him up every damn time I come to La Crosse. But those were some great days. And I got to go to Japan on R&R and bought a great set of dishes to give to your father, George Pearse, panning to George Pearse
All
now.
right. These were
Or the wedding. They were wedding gifts.
For whose
Wedding
wedding?
gift.
These were women?
Dishes.
These were
Yeah.
Arataki dishes,
Oh, the
Eating dishes.
you
They
eat
are
all
eating
that.
dishes. Right.
Chinaware. And you still got some of them. I don't
Yeah,
think
we
you-
do.
some and all of them.
Yeah. Yep, you're right.
And I bought another set of Noritake for us, which we still have in those days. And we bought a whole bunch of oysters, where they guarantee you, the oysters in those days were, I think, 100 yen per oyster, but they guaranteed you at least one pearl per oysters. And they had the white pearl oysters, and they had the black pearl oysters. The black pearl oysters were 300 yen an oyster. And I wasn't blowing, 300 yen in those days was damn near 6 bits, and I was not blowing that kind of money for any black pearls. But I did get a bunch of white pearls. Yeah, I was still too close to my Newburgh roots. Those days to throw money away. Your
It's the
father
Newburgh side of the
now
family
is
that's
just
very parsimonious.
about at the same time, level that I was back in those days.
I never got away from the Newburgh roots.
I saw it.
Right.
Who's Newburgh?
Newburgh was my mother's
Name.
name was Newburgh. In other words, from my mother's side was the Newburgh side.
So that's our Jewish roots?
That's the German roots.
Oh.
Very likely.
Very likely there might have been some Jewish background there.
The Newburghs were Lutherans in Germany, and they came from a number of places in Germany, but Stadtheim and Rhenish Prussia. There's another place near Cologne, Germany. Your Uncle Gene Newburgh has this, and I've got a lot of information on roots in Germany. We'll get back to that someday.
How did our Pearses get to La Crosse from the East Coast?
Well, the Pearses came from Bristol, Rhode Island, and Richard Smith Pearse Jr. left Bristol, Rhode Island, met Addie F. Sweet and married her in Mason City, Iowa. Somehow made his way to Minneapolis.
Why? What was his motivation for leaving?
The buzzword in those days was "Go West, young
Go
man."
West, young
The East
man.
was becoming overcrowded, and he had a number of brothers and sisters, and I think his brother Oliver was probably outshone Richard Smith Pearse Jr. Richard Smith Pearse Jr. was not an extraordinarily successful individual. In fact, grandfather Roy Pearse had to work, never had a lot of formal education. He had to go to work at an early age simply because his father was not that successful in life. He was self-educated, a very, very well-educated individual. So somehow they ended up, and I can't really tell you exactly what the motivation was to get him to the Midwest.
But grandfather Roy was still born in Bristol and raised in Bristol.
See that?
Yes, he was born in Bristol, reared in Bristol, and in Minneapolis. Because his father did have a home in Bristol. So it was a case of, back and forth. which is quite a trek in those days. All the railroads are good. Railroads are very, very good. So, whoops.
Plenty of film left. Plenty of film left.
He came to lacrosse then, right? He came from,
Now, he met my mother, Edith Newberg, was teaching school in Chicago. And my father met her in Chicago, and I can't tell you what how they met. I know Dad had been, according to Uncle George Davis, after he was pushed out of the Naval Academy, was indicated he did serve in the Coast Guard during World War I. After the Coast Guard, he worked in lumber camps in Spokane, in the Oregon area, and
For his uncle.
for his, well, George Davis indicated that Uncle George didn't know Dick was there.
That's right, but he worked in one of
And
his
that
camps.
Dad had sort of disappeared for a few years, and grandfather first never knew where the hell he was. Uncle George ran into him in the lumber camps, and then he did work for Uncle George out in that area, and he's done everything from high rigging to cooking. And then he got a job through Uncle George as a purchasing agent for Weyerhaeuser, and he was located for a while in Quincy, Illinois. And somehow met Mother in the Chicago area. They were married in the Chicago area, and then grandfather Newberg took him under his wing and moved him to La Crosse. Because when my father married my mother, grandfather Pearse said, you know, the kid disappeared for a couple of years, comes back and marries a Catholic, and that's enough. Out he goes, you know. So he didn't have a hell of a lot to do with my father until a few years after Dickie was born, really. So they came to La Crosse, really, through grandfather Newberg, sort of pulling his daughter home. And so La Crosse is really a place where family's only been for a couple of generations.
so my great-grandfather was a Methodist, right?
Yeah.
And he was very strong feeling about being
Very strong.
Yes. Yep. In fact, Captain William Pearse, and that's my great-great-great-grandfather. Your great-great-great-grandfather was one of the founders of the Methodist Church in this country.
Back in Bristol, Rhode Island.
Oh Lord,
Yeah.
you're kidding me.
Oh, no.
One of my ancestors helped found a religion?
Absolutely. He was,
incredible.
God.
he had more to do with
In the United States, in the United States, honey.
Methodist bishops and getting the religion started and moving it through the heathens. And there were a hell of a lot of heathens around in those days. And
Still are.
anybody?
Still are.
Still are, right.
Jim, where do your uncles live right now? Grandpa's brothers or brother?
Grandfather had no brothers.
Okay, he didn't have a
Just,
brother.
grandfather was an only son, and he had one sister, Aunt Betty. Aunt Betty was married to Uncle George.
And his father disowned him, he was the only son?
That's correct.
What a son
So
of a bitch.
we have no other
My God.
we have no other real direct relatives then. Any other persons in another area of the country that are.
You do have two, let's see, Uncle George Gardner, my father's uncle, had two children, both girls, Della Jean and Mary Gardner. And Della Jean lives in River Forest, Illinois, and she's married to Fred Groen, G-R-O-E-N. And Groen was in the commercial cookware business. They made great copper kettles and stainless steel things to outfit commercial kitchens. And Mary Gardner married Fred Clark, who lives in Rockford, Illinois.
Right.
And in fact, one of the Groen children were married on the 9th of June. And we received a invitation and sent after the wedding, you know, an announcement, and have sent them a gift, and we'll see them every so often. Now, my father and Mary and Della Jean were first cousins, and I am their first cousin once removed. You are their first cousin twice removed. Their children and your father and I are second cousins. You're the second cousin once removed with their children, and they all have families. I can't tell you how many children. I believe the Groans have 3, and I think the Clarks have 2 or 3 children. Assorted boys and girls, various ages.
Did your father's father have any brothers?
No, he had.
God, there are no
father's father,
Pearses.
That's why.
Colonel Roy Pearse had 2 sisters.
We gotta quit
Addie
having
and
girls in this
Mabel.
family. We gotta quit having girls. There were no boys back then. Really? I mean,
Addie and Mabel,
only child, 2 generations in a row?
Never married. Both, they were maiden aunts.
So there really are no other Pearses split from how many generations you have to go back to find a
Pearses
Pearse?
in Rhode Island someplace. When we go back to my grandfather's father, had a fairly large number of brothers and sisters. And
So your
one-
great uncles? Yeah, great uncles.
And one of his brothers was Oliver. And Oliver has a separate plot in the Bristol Cemetery. And he had one son, Levi, and I've forgotten the others, but one of his daughters was married to a very prominent politician in Rhode Island, and the Oliver Pearse family were the last Pearse owners of the Captain William Pearse House, which was built 1696 and was the family home up until about 1920, 1930, thereabouts. So your basic roots are in Bristol, Rhode Island, and in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. Also Block Island and Nantucket. Gardeners were many gardeners in Nantucket.
Now, did I spell your name with an S or a C? S?
Yes,
When did we change that? How'd that come about?
damned if I know.
Changed it back in England.
The spelling of the family name actually changed from Percy, P-E-R-C-Y, in about 1590 to Pearse, P-E-A-R-C-E, or P-E-A-R-S-E, or P-E-I-R-S-E, P-E-I-R-C-E. And there is a Pearse Hall, spelled P-E-A-R-C-E, in England. I forget where the genealogy indicates it's located.
Is it pronounced Pearse though?
Can't tell you, I wasn't around.
Who knows?
It's not there anymore.
How do you write down the pronunciation?
Have you ever thought of putting all this on a computer?
Yeah.
Cataloging it, cross-referencing all the names?
I've got a database program.
Do you?
I could put it on my computer.
That would be great, because then it would be simple to copy discs and send them around.
And add and change things.
And add and change, exactly. And that's precisely what I do. What I want to do instead of the damned index cards.
Well, they make programs just for this now, where it'll give you the family
But
relationship.
you've got DBase too. That's a relational database program. That'd be perfect. You ought to put it on your
But
computer.
they've actually made computer programs where you store everyone's name in and you give it the relationships, starting from here and spread out. And you just type in any 2 names and it'll give you the correct relationship. And then trace, through it. It'll give you, third cousin.
What you
twice
need
removed,
is a
and then-
relational database system which keys and indexes off of any field. And that's what
DBase
Bobby's
does.
will do. Oh, and mine will do that also, but
What type of computer do you have?
I've got a Commodore.
64? Yeah, we have one at home.
Do you?
Yeah, we've got a 64 at home.
Well, when I come to see you in New York, I'll bring my 30 discs of
Okay.
software.
Do you have a disk drive?
You know,
But I've got some at work. I've got some Commodore disk drives at work. The main ones I've got at work are the TRS-80s, and I've got one Apple and three IBM PCs, and some Epson and some of the TRS-100s.
Do you have any, what kind of, do you have any software for your Commodore at home?
Yeah, we got some software, and I got a whole slug of it, because one of the guys that works for me is a hacker, I mean a legitimate hacker.
Great,
Does a lot of
copyright.
game programming and things like this.
I belong to a hacker group in Michigan, and I've got just about everything. Well, you know, a lot, not everything.
Mhm.
I've got Flight Simulator 2. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, yeah.
You have all your controls,
So we're all-
and you fly a plane. It's very realistic. Well, we'll get together. You really ought to get a disk drive, though. It makes it
Yeah, I
so
know.
clumsy to use.
I know it does. But this is primarily Tommy's computer at home, and I just, well, his birthday is, today's the 3rd of July, no, tomorrow's the 3rd of July.
Yeah.
His birthday's tomorrow, I was gonna get him a disk drive, so.
There you go.
So it'll be delayed.
That would be good for transferring, because my computer reads Commodore 64s, and I can
Well,
read
sure.
the data
And
files.
my computer will read your data files. It just won't be able to use them. It can read them and display it.
Right. Well, yeah, I can format my disk for Commodore. It's an option. You switch mine to Commodore.
Well, see, I got a word processor that'll write ASCII ASCII sequential files. So you can use that to word process just like I can use yours to. See, I've got a word processor. As well as I can upload and download. I can transfer my files that I type in by phone to you, and you can download it into your Commodore, so I don't have to mail it.
You know, when they finally get these ARM computers pretty well standardized, it would be nice to be able to just, you know, give you a call if we found another element or something like that, and transfer that over the phone, and you know, just transfer your computer files
The
over.
area where we need a lot of help is in the Newberg relationships going back.
Yeah, I guess that is right.
Wait, do you make
Also
trips all
Gardner
over?
relationships, and I have to, that's why Georgie and I are going to visit Delagene and Mary, Delagene in particular. She's more interested in family history than Mary Gardner. And I'm going to start, you know, these are things I keep thinking, well, this coming week, or maybe this coming month, generally it's this coming winter.
That's that's far
I'm
enough
going to do
away.
all of these
That's
things.
far enough away to say that, yeah.
I know, it's,
Well, you know, you're
You can always include it.
Yeah.
okay, girls, I think what I better do at this point is cut it off,